Hello again, and welcome to episode 5 of the Burning Bush podcast. My name's Spencer.
I'm Sean.
I'm Zach.
And we're just 3 young Jewish teenagers growing up in a major metropolitan area, Houston, Texas, just giving our perspective on stuff from our specific demographic. Today, we're going to be talking about careers and how people are going to be living their life after school and whether or not following your passion and really going for doing what you love to do is worth it in the end if it means more financial insecurity or risk. I think when I first heard about the topic and we first kind of agreed on what we were going to be talking about today, it came to my mind how compared to other generations, we've just, from the experience that I'm getting and from what I've heard from other people, is very few people our age actually have like unrealistic dreams. Like when I ask someone what they want to do, it's very like I want to be like an engineer or something.
Like they already know.
Yeah.
I mean, if you ask me, like I kind of already know. If like someone's like, "Oh yeah, what do you want to be when you grow up?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna go to college. I'm gonna be pre-med. You know, I'm just gonna follow."
Do you want to become a doctor?
Yeah, I mean, I've always wanted to be a doctor. That's
Really?
the thing, because like both my parents are doctors, and it's kind of just a thing I've always wanted to do, even without their influence. It's not like they're like, "You need to be doctor." No, I was just like, I want to be doctor.
I was gonna say, like y'all say that, but like I've never really known what I want to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, that's definitely like a large percentage of people, I think, who just are still sort of not fully like set on what they want to do. But I don't know anyone who wants to be like a singer or something like that. That sounds like, obviously I probably shouldn't, but also like when you hear about like the stereotypical like millennial generation, it's always sort of like filled with people who like, I don't know, I've just gotten the vibe from a lot of adults that like millennials as a generation have grown up always, I'm using air quotes here, like thinking that they're like the most special person in the world and being very egocentric. And we are not millennials, we're below millennials. But I don't see that often. I think a lot of people in like the age group we're in are just all sort of focused on just super realistic, mediocre goals for their careers. And I think that's because they have the fear of becoming financially insecure.
Becoming a failure.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
That's a big fear I think a lot of people have, because I think we've gotten rid of that, like, not gotten rid of, but the characteristic of being like an alpha and going and getting what you want and sort of like really I'm struggling to find the words, but like
Pushing yourself to the limit.
forming your own path, that has become way less encouraged, I think, in our like demographic, because we've just always sort of had that belief that we're just gonna like go down a path, like go to school for a long time and finally get this job.
And I feel like school itself kind of enforces that in a way, because
Mm-hmm.
you just kind of, I mean, everything's kind of linear with school.
Yeah.
You kind of like figure out what
You don't really have
like.
a whole lot of stuff to choose until like kind of in the very end, like towards the end. But
Yeah.
I also feel like during school you kind of figure out what you do and don't want to do because you're like not good at a subject.
yeah.
But even then, I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about like your unrealistic dream that like you hear of some, like when your parents were kids, I'm assuming all of our parents had like aspirations to do something that they probably didn't end up doing. And I just don't think, for better or for worse, that's not as common in our
probably.
group. I don't like, for me, I want to become like a film composer and like make music that'll go underneath like movies and TV shows. And and I think that's a pretty like uncommon goal, but it's still like an aspiration that I think requires a lot of risk, and it definitely terrifies me when it comes to actually like possibly following through with that. But at the end of the day, I think it's like what I want to do as I grow up, but that doesn't like I don't know anyone else who's really like even like something like I want to become like a professional soccer player. Like that I don't know anyone who like wants to be anything other than like an engineer or a scientist or a it's all like so mediocre.
I don't know if this is a connection or something, but I feel like the more uncommon jobs take more talent, I would say, and the more common jobs are kind of how you have to work for. For example, I mean, I don't like you probably have to work for both, definitely, but the more uncommon ones, you kind of already like have the talent. It's just are you like that one person that can do the job? Whereas if you have a more common job, like for a doctor, it's kind of it's not like, oh yeah, we choose this doctor over you. You just need to like work to be good enough to be that doctor.
With more uncommon, I know what you're talking about. It's not are you qualified. It's like are you one of the most qualified people in your field.
Yeah.
That is definitely true. And with that comes a much higher level of competition in more artistic fields, which like isn't a surprise to anyone. If you're going into like if you're gonna become like an artist or a musician or something, you're gonna have to like it's going to be harder to sustain yourself because it's not the qualifications to keep food on the table is not based on like whether or not you know like where the anatomy of the brain is or whatever. It's based on like can you provide a better emotional response in people than like everyone else who's working to do the exact same thing that
and
you
even
are.
if you do, like you still have to be like have your stuff spread out there, and that's a whole thing.
Well, also with those more uncommon jobs, I feel so that with those you have to like most of them are just like entertainers. You're like a musician, composer. You're an actor, comedian, whatever. You have to, or a musician
and athletes.
Yeah, athletes.
People don't realize
job.
like when it comes to athletic sports and like professional sports, the money you're making is not from like being good at your sport. While like it does help, you will make the majority of your money from people who pay to watch you play.
Yeah.
So at the heart of it, you are also an entertainer.
So those uncommon jobs are just about entertaining people, whereas those more common jobs are just not really.
It's just services.
Yeah, it's just service.
Or like producing goods.
That's why it's harder to make it in a more uncommon job because people are judging you. You have to fit yourself to the people's preference.
It's the same thing with entrepreneurial jobs. Because with that you have to like first come up with an idea and you are solely responsible for yourself when it comes to like holding yourself accountable, growing your business, making sure everything's in line, making sure you have enough product, and like really like building yourself up from the ground. And again, just because that's like the type of job that's entailed, like a lot of people in that I know our age just don't really have that aspiration. That could be I don't know if y'all heard this saying, like it often goes when you grow up, like the straight A student will end up working for the straight C student or whatever. And I've heard that a couple times before, and it's kind of got me thinking a lot because when I usually ask people about their careers, most of the time it's going to be people that I think have like pretty good academic records and are pretty academically successful, and they often have a lot of jobs where they are like working for somebody else, and like their entire purpose in their career is like producing a good or producing a service rather than being in a position of management or like entrepreneurship or in like the arts. And I think that's because a lot of those positions are going to be left for people who aren't as heavily invested in the school environment of working hard for somebody else and to get good grades, and they're more prone to following their own path and really working hard to make your passion a reality.
As I've been thinking about what I want to do, my dad's kind of been talking to me about like when you like go to college and everything, try like expanding a little bit about what you want to do and just like test the waters sort of. And also I can obviously do what I want, like go through with like my major and everything, pre-med, blah blah blah. But I also have like in the back of my head that I'd be able to maybe like bring something new to the table. Like going along with what I'm doing in the first place, which is risky, but I also have like the backup, which is just the normal like join the system, you're just part of this system job instead of creating something new.
I wouldn't say part of the system. Maybe like, because no matter what you're doing, you're going to be like quote unquote part of like a system of how the world works. It's just whether or not you want to work to like help improve and change the system, or literally just like be a part of how the system runs and like and just like be like a natural like worker in your environment. I feel more and more like the divide between like worker and boss, and that's not to say one is better than the other, but it requires different qualifications to do either one. And I think just among you can disagree with me like if you don't see what I'm seeing, but there are very few people I know who are really, really set on like rising up to that position and being a active contributor and a worker in the field of their dreams.
Yeah.
Like no one wants to be a athlete anymore, or a like it just
even if they're
got
talented with it too. Like you can have a friend who like goes to meet like let's say track meets or whatever, and they like get first place like first, second, third regularly. They don't think about like being a track star. They're just like, no, that's not.
Of course not.
It's not possible. I still need to get good grades. I need to make sure that I do well in school so I can grow up to be like an engineer. And like even though they definitely have the talent to be a good college athlete and then have a team like or some sort just like recruit them and be like, okay, we want you.
Do you think that's because most people see all these extracurricular activities and like talents that they have as a less of career opportunities and more of just something to show colleges so they can get in like and go into the before. But then that means that in a lot of people's heads, something that they're really gifted in, they aren't going to use to make a career out of. They're going to use to satisfy their parents more so they can go into a field that is less customized for their particular desires.
Yeah. Well, going back to that boss worker thing, like my dad's like a boss since he has a private practice, and like as I've seen him working and kind of grown up, I realized like what the difference is working for someone and being the boss of what you work for. And like when I like from what I see, like I want to grow up, be a doctor, whatever. I'm probably gonna have to work for a hospital of some sort just to like start. But I definitely would want to go like private practice or something, unless I get like a really nice opportunity somewhere. But I would want to rather work for myself than work for someone else. Yeah. So I can be more flexible at least, and I can kind of have time to like kind of chase those aspirations at the same time. Have like, or maybe just have like a side hobby. Like I play tennis, continue playing tennis, maybe like coach on the side or something. Keep that as a thing that I want to do.
Right.
Kind of chase your dream, but not as much.
Also with the boss thing, like my dad, I remember he was working, like he would work for a company doing his computer stuff for like probably 10 years or so. And then a couple years ago, he decided that he would start his own company within the same field. And like during that time, like, I could tell it was a lot of like he was working a lot more.
Yeah.
Like it was a lot of hard work, and then only like a few months ago, he's under another company again.
Oh, okay. I think like even if it's not like ultimately successful, I don't know whether or not it really was, but I still commend someone like that for like having the courage to know that there's a very real possibility of failure, but understanding that like that there's also a very real possibility of huge success, and the only determiner of how that plays out that you can control is yourself. And that's like a very, very admirable thing that I think is lacking in a lot of people's like worldviews, especially now. Even like when you were younger, like when you were in like 6th grade, did you know anyone who was like, I want to be a dancer or something? Like even then, like no, everyone had very like specific views on what they wanted to do, and it's so weird to think about, because the cliche is always like you should have some sort of
realistic
passion
job.
And even after you go to college, you basically like already committed to like a career that you're gonna have to stick with for the rest of your life. Like, could you imagine like being like 30 and like switching your career like that? That's definitely happened. I'm not saying it's wrong to do that, but it's a weird thing to think about how often committing to a career when you're 18 is like a decision that will affect the entire like future of your entire life.
There's actually a story kind of with these two basketball players that come from Spain, Pau and Marc Gasol. They're both like really tall centers, obviously, and they actually studied to be doctors. And then suddenly they're like, you know what, we're gonna like, they played professional basketball and they were really good. And Pau got like championships and stuff, and Marc is like an extremely good player. It's crazy thinking they actually like ditched what they were doing before, because they actually realized that they can chase their dreams, and they were successful doing so.
Yeah.
And the problem with doing that now is when you don't have a definite realistic path, like if you tell your parent, I want to be like a dancer for blah, blah, blah. You're like, nah, you're crazy. You're not going to go anywhere. Mm-hmm. And that actually crushes the dreams, like, obviously.
I think what also kind of crushes people's like aspirations to follow their passion is like the internet, because now you have access to very clearly see like, oh, like yeah, I'm good at something, but like look at these like 20 other people who have like a lot of like, let's say, YouTube subscribers, because they're young kids who are incredibly talented in this field, and that sort of like makes you think like there's no way I would be able to actually compete with them. And I think that's like a good and bad thing, because again, it'll make you more realistic, but there are a lot of people, I think, who would just be happier in the field that they'd want to be in, rather than like settling for something that they probably won't be happy in, just knowing that they will be financially stable. That's what it all comes down to. It's being happy with your career. Not in all cases, because like
there's a lot of cases where people can be happy.
Not in all cases. I don't mean like if you become a doctor, you will not be happy with your career in your life, because that's obviously not true. There are a lot of people who love what they do, and like there are a lot of jobs such as doctors or businessmen and salespeople that are suited for people, but in cases where people, I think, would truly be happier as an artist or an author or something like that, the decision they have to make is whether they want to be whether they want to do what they love
And take the chance.
and like risk having massive amounts of wealth problems and financial problems, or do something that probably will not enjoy as much in exchange for the satisfaction in knowing that you don't have to worry as much about money all the time. And it's a terrible thing to think about, but I think the fear of that financial insecurity is way, way, way stronger in a lot of people in a bigger city.
Yeah.
Because if you're in a bigger city, you're going to be constantly surrounded by people, like a large amount of people who are constantly competing for money, especially in the city.
Yeah.
Because like that's just like the whole dynamic of a city. And when you're like that, you're gonna be way, way less interested in throwing away your ticket to financial security when you know it's already really hard to get in the first place.
Here's a funny story. When I went to Spain for spring break, I got kind of close with my uncle, and we were talking, and he was like, "Oh yeah, a bunch of these random 20-year-old kids want to be online entertainers on YouTube and be like vloggers and stuff." And he was like, "They're all idiots because they're not going to get anywhere." And that could be very true, because it does take a large stroke of luck for you to actually make it on like the internet. And you can see someone that kind of like is in the system, which is like my uncle, comparing to someone who just wants to like try chasing their dreams. And but you can still see that that person in the system was very successful, because he's a pretty successful dentist, I'd have to say. And if like chasing that dream and being that YouTuber can be very, very risky. So that's why many people just choose to stay on that normal path.
Well, specifically with the profession of a YouTuber, I think that's a lot more like algorithmic than a lot of people realize. Because there are a lot of people, and like there are a lot of people who form companies like just to get YouTube views and get like that AdSense and stuff. So a lot of the times, like people who want to be professional, people who are professional YouTubers and make YouTube videos for a living, sometimes they don't even want to be doing that either. They just understand that there's such a large audience of like children, and they're so easily like influenced and pandered to that it's really easy. I've seen a bunch of these like the Paul brothers, like I don't want to like get super into this, but they probably like, do you believe down in your heart like that both of them really truly like more than anything wanted to be like YouTubers?
Well,
like,
they started when they were younger than you. They started when they were like our age or a little bit younger, and they had this other channel. And then
they
they
doing
like
Vine or something.
I have
were
no
on
idea.
Vine.
But even
and then they switched over.
They got big on Vine.
And they kind of like restarted and blew up a ton. And then one of them got on Disney Channel and got kicked off. Kind of funny.
Even then though, like they it just they seem so not genuinely happy to be doing what they're doing. It's.
Well, I mean, if you look at their content, it's kind of just like, oh yeah, what are we gonna do next? We gotta let's buy this panda and throw it off the roof.
It's
into the
all
pool.
just to like do the craziest stuff to get children's attention. But that's a tangent for
And
something
also
else.
with YouTube, there's the whole issue of YouTube demonetizing people.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like, say like if that's your whole like your job is YouTube, and you just get like a bunch of stuff demonetized, like you're screwed.
Yeah, you are screwed.
You have to be way more careful. YouTube, I don't want to say it's becoming censored, but you have to like worry so much about what you're saying, and when the freedom of true expression on YouTube starts to get cut off, it's going to be replaced by these people who see it as a source of revenue. If they play by the algorithm, they'll be able to exploit this opportunity for money that has been taken away from all these independent YouTubers that probably we grew up watching, that weren't tied to like a company or a group. or something.
It's becoming part of this system.
Yeah, totally. It's crossing
As
over.
are sports as well.
Mhm.
You can kind of see that.
Mhm.
And I mean, you can kind of see on the other side, on the YouTube part, with like comparing to the Paul brothers, you can kind of see Dude Perfect. I mean, when I see them, they genuinely love what they do, and they're all talented in sports, which is kind of impressive.
I totally agree.
And they're just like a bunch of guys that decided to start, and they actually ended up chasing their dream. And they have this whole brand. It's like a household name at this point.
Yeah.
And you're like 7 years old. You grab a basketball and you're like, dude, perfect. And then you chuck it across the street and you make it in. And you're like, oh my god, like that's the difference.
There's never a point in like a video that I've seen of them where I don't truly believe that they love what they're doing, and I think that also marks out like a very specific thing or a very prominent characteristic you have to have if you truly want to chase a passion of yours, is you have to
genuinely want
always like know and remember like that you're doing this because you love doing it, because it's going to be so easy for you to get swept up in all like the tedious like characteristics and like intertwining rules of like the field you're going to be working in, which I think can happen to a lot of people, specifically like on YouTube. Again, also in sports, because you have people who are like signing brand deals, like making their own styled clothing, being in like commercials and stuff. And what I've realized now is the way an athlete behaves off the field is becoming more and more tied to how much money they make and how financially stable they're going to be. As I'm not saying like any professional NFL players are not financially successful, because they all are, but regardless of whether or not I agree with it, Colin Kaepernick making that statement that he did by kneeling during the national anthem, I think
he's kind of showing that he's doing what he likes.
It's
what he loves.
Yeah, I would actually disagree with that though, because he's doing that. He's making that statement on the behalf of like social change. And I think he, as an athlete who truly like is there to play football out of the love of football,
that's true.
You're disconnecting yourself from what you initially planned to do, because you're again getting caught up in
other stuff that's
like,
not what you're supposed to be doing.
But like someone like JJ Watt, I think like when he shows that he is like a part of his community and he is like a Houston
donates like $40 million.
He helped raise a ton of money for Harvey. He knows that that's going to like drastically improve his public image, and it's going to result in him being a much more well-liked person, because he understands, I hope he understands, that he is an entertainer, not just an athlete.
Yeah, and he definitely didn't do that for just like to like get the recognition. He definitely, you could see that he has passion in his heart and he wants to help his city, because they gave to him and he wants to give back.
Completely. No, I totally.
And that's kind of the difference with like athletes, I can say, that you can tell the difference is when they actually want to do it, they're more successful than when it's more of a business.
Yeah.
We had this prompt in our English class, which was being idealistic or realistic, and
we had I wrote an essay about it.
Yeah, and I wrote about the Williams sisters, which is actually.
First of all, which one did you like? Did you write your essay about why it's more important to be idealistic or realistic?
I actually talked about being idealistic.
Okay.
Because I said that was actually, I said following the heart can actually be more successful if you actually follow your like heart.
Yeah.
Which is like again,
I forgot what I wrote about.
So I gave example to the Williams sisters and how they grew up in Compton, and totally random for two sisters to be the best tennis players in the world. They didn't expect to be the best tennis players in the world. They didn't know they were going to sign with all these companies. Like No, and they just did because they like followed their dreams.
Yeah.
And they weren't like, okay, guys, we need to train this much more so we can get that much better to make it in the higher like rank in the circuit. No, they just played and they became that good because
it's
they
not
truly
a
wanted it.
goal that they have.
Yeah.
It's a dream that they have
Mhm.
because it's fueled out of emotional need rather than like logical
Yeah.
like steps and work. And I'm not like saying that hard work won't get you where you are, because it totally will. My personal belief is that like it's not even about the dream at all. It's about the steps you take to like
Make it happen.
actually make the dream something that actually exists in your life.
It's kind of funny. You can
Uh-huh.
put that in example with the podcast. 'Cause
Yeah.
we were just sitting around at like 3 a.m. and we were
Wasn't
talking
that
about stuff. It was.
Is it like
And,
midnight?
and we were just talking about stuff.
Okay.
And then I was like, yo, we should do something with this. And Spencer's like, let's start a podcast. I'm like, you know what? Yeah. And then we're just all like, yeah. And then he's like, okay, guys, we actually need to like make sure we do it.
The second I had the idea, I was very, very adamant on
Following through with it.
on making sure this isn't like
Yeah.
just an idea we had, because that's definitely happened with other people.
For
like
sure.
we probably know some people who have like had the idea of like starting like something similar to this, whether it was a podcast
there's
or like a
this-
YouTube
Right
I
channel.
heard
now,
about
or
that
something.
one. It's like that kid from the school we know that started a thrift store, and it went broke after 2 weeks because he didn't know what he was doing and he didn't really follow through with it. He was just like spur of the moment.
Well, even then, like, did he like? I don't know who this person is, but did he have like a physical location,
No, I think he might have.
or was it online?
I'm not sure. I think it was a physical location, but I could kind of tell it might have not been his true passion. And it was kind of like overhyped. I can kind of like his only customers were like a few of his friends, and that was kind of it.
I mean,
And of course, you got to
when you're
start there.
when you're
but-
talking about like a thrift store,
thrift store.
I think it's a bit different from like a podcast,
podcast, yeah.
because the thrift store is dependent on you having a significant audience of people who want to buy your
Yeah.
product, whereas this really doesn't have any negative risk. So I mean, I don't think it's like a bad thing. I actually like really commend whoever
Yeah,
this
yeah, that's
person
cool.
is for like really
No,
like
for sure. I do.
following through with that. But with this specifically, I just know a lot of people who I think have had ideas similar to this, and the main thing that I really value is like getting started rather than just keeping an idea in your head and never seeing it to fruition. Especially at the age we are at right now, we have like there's no reason why we can't do this if we think it'd be fun.
Yeah.
Like, and I really am grateful that we still have that ability.
But then there's also that thing that you said earlier, where when you're doing something, you have to remember why you're doing it, and you have to remember to keep
Completely.
doing it. You have to remember to keep doing it. You have to organize it,
Mm-hmm.
but you also have to remember you're doing it for yourself.
Yeah, 100%. That's great. Yeah, so we can use that as a bit of a stopping point.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you guys for joining us on the 5th episode of The Burning Bush. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.